Coming up on this Thursday edition of Daybreak, Panamanian investigators say additional arms equipment, MiG-21 jet engines and military vehicles were found on the seized North Korean freighter caught last month carrying Cuban arms. Authorities there have asked a UN inspection team to delay their arrival to August 12th. Describing growth in the first half as modest, the US Federal Reserve says it will continue with its bond-buying stimulus program. Meanwhile, the report shows the US economy grew more than expected in the second quarter, but growth in the first was revised down. Plus, citing a threat to national security, Egypt's interim government orders security forces to disperse pro-Morsy protests in Cairo. The ousted president's supporters say they will stay put. Daybreak begins now.
Good to have you with us. You're watching Daybreak on Thursday, August 1st here in Seoul, and I'm Choi You-sun. Let's start this morning with the North Korean flagged freighter seized in Panama. Panamanian authorities say they found more military hardware from the North Korean ship caught last month carrying Cuban arms. On top of the missile radar systems and two fighter jets they found earlier, a dozen of fighter jet engines and several military vehicles were uncovered. Our Han Da-eun has the latest on the discovery.
Panamanian investigators said on Tuesday local time that they've discovered 12 motors for MiG-21 fighter jets and 5 military vehicles on the seized North Korean cargo ship.
In these containers, we found what seems to be jet engines for MiG-21s. We are talking about 12 jet engines in the containers we have opened so far, as well as a vehicle that seems to be some type of control center, used to direct batteries of radars and missiles.
This comes a week after Panama President Ricardo Martinelli told reporters that 2 MiG-21 fighter jets, originally produced by the Soviet Union in 1950s, and 2 units of missile radar systems had been found on the vessel. The ship, named Cheongcheongang, was en route from Cuba to North Korea when it was seized in Panama during an inspection. Local investigators say the weapons were hidden under sacks of brown sugar. Panamanian authorities are currently inspecting all of the seized military equipment while they wait for an inspection team from the UN Security Council to arrive on site.
As acting foreign minister, I've been speaking with UN Ambassador Thalasinos in New York, who at the same time has been speaking with representatives from that organization. They've given us a date, which is the 12th of August, so that we may be able to work.
Regarding the 35 North Korean crew members that are being held in detention, President Martinelli has said that diplomatic negotiations will need to take place before they can return to the north. Local officials say they face up to 6 years in prison. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
South Korea's humanitarian aid groups began sending food and medicine for children in the impoverished north on Wednesday. This comes despite the heightened tension between the two Koreas over the impasse at the joint business park. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee has more.
5 South Korean civic groups that received approval from the South Korean government earlier this week began sending humanitarian aid to North Korea on Wednesday. The organizations will send around $1.4 million worth of medicine and food for young North Korean children throughout next month. Recent surveys by the United Nations show more than 1 in 4 North Korean children under the age of 5 suffer from chronic malnutrition. Figures also point to rising infant mortality rates in the impoverished state in recent years. The current rate is more than 6 times higher than that of the South. Seoul's seemingly generous gesture comes a matter of days after the two Koreas walked away from talks on reopening their jointly run factory zone in the north. South Korean President Park Geun-hye has stressed humanitarian aid to North Korea will be dealt with separately from political issues. But the government's plan to approve private shipments of aid was announced as South Korean Unification Minister Ryu Gil-jae made what he called the last offer for talks to the North regarding the Kaesong industrial complex. North Korea has yet to respond. The two Koreas have held 6 rounds of working-level talks this month on ways to reopen the business park, but Pyongyang has not provided the security guarantees the South has been looking for to restart operations there. The factory zone has been shuttered for more than 3 months since the North unilaterally withdrew all of its workers amid an escalation of inter-Korean tensions. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Over the past week or so, foreign reporters have been given rare access to North Korea and its leadership as the country marked the 60th anniversary of the Korean War armistice. Arirang reports on what could be behind the display of openness.
Reporters and cameramen file in towards North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. This is Kim right after attending an event marking the 60th anniversary of the end of the Korean War in Pyongyang last week. North Korea's Special Envoy Choi You-sun clears the way for Kim, but does not stop them from filming. Kim doesn't answer the questions the reporters ask, responding instead with a calm smile. What you're seeing here is a rarity. Scores of foreign journalists have been granted full access to the North Korean leader.
Ask a 12-year-old what's his favorite TV show, and he answers, "I like cartoons and documentary films about Kim Il-sung."
The journalists were able to freely film the North Korean people, as well as take candid shots of an official yawning or a soldier slouched on the floor. Experts say this can be seen as the regime's attempt to project a sense of openness while showing its stability. Yuri-an, Arirang News.
Japan's minor Social Democratic Party has strongly criticized Deputy Prime Minister Taro Aso's recent reference to the Nazi regime and called on him to give up his parliamentary seat. According to Kyodo News, the party also urged Aso to retract his remarks, including a comparison of Japan's constitutional revision to the Nazi era. Earlier, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said the Deputy Prime Minister should explain why he made the comments that have sparked anger in neighboring countries, including South Korea. During a lecture on Monday, Aso suggested Japan study how Weimar Germany's constitution was transformed into the Nazi regime, stressing Tokyo's constitutional revision should be done quietly. Chinese women who were forced into sexual slavery by Japanese soldiers during World War II are taking on Osaka Mayor Toru Hashimoto, who has made a number of inflammatory remarks about the women. 3 of the so-called comfort women, with the support of some 170 Japanese citizens, submitted a request to the Osaka Bar Association calling for a disciplinary action against Hashimoto for his offensive remarks about the comfort women. The lawyer-turned-mayor is a member of the association. Hashimoto has stated that sexual slaves were necessary for Japanese soldiers whose nerves were frayed by war. The Chinese women claim his remarks seriously infringed on their human rights and caused them severe mental stress. President Park Geun-hye has accepted Queen Elizabeth II's invitation to make a state visit to the United Kingdom this November. Presidential Office spokesperson Kim Heng said President Park is scheduled to meet with the Queen and hold a bilateral summit with Prime Minister David Cameron. The two sides are still working out the details of the visit, which is scheduled for November 5th to the 7th. Korea and the UK are currently commemorating their 130th anniversary of diplomatic relations. President Park's state visit to England will be her first to a European nation and the second to the UK for a sitting Korean president after former President Roh Moo-hyun's back in 2004.
If you want the latest news from Korea and around the world.
Return to the negotiations.
President Park Geun-hye plans, given the current circumstances.
On your way to work or at home.
Defense Ministry. The legislature will convene a.
Tune into Daybreak on Arirang TV.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tuesday. On Korea's economic front, the country's leading conglomerates keep posting handsome profits and sales, but this doesn't seem to be trickling down to the rest of the economy. That's partly because these companies are making their most profitable products overseas. Hwang Jie has the details. Although the nation's largest companies like Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motor continue posting record or near record profits and sales recently, most Koreans don't feel they're benefiting from the stellar performances. Why? One big reason is that the companies are focusing their expansion on key projects overseas. Samsung Electronics has announced major investment plans to spend a whopping 24 trillion won, or roughly $21 billion this year, after the tech giant last week reported a record profit of $8.5 billion in the second quarter of this year. Most of the investments, however, will be made to expand and update its production facilities overseas, particularly in China. That means Samsung won't create jobs or boost economic activities in Korea. Samsung allocated 1/3 of the $21 billion investment spending to build a flash memory chip factory at Xi'an, China, and an additional $3 billion to build a display panel factory in Suzhou on China's east coast. Korea accounts for well below a quarter of the company's expenditure for investment projects this year. It's a similar story for Hyundai Motor, which also reported a record sales and near record high profit in the second quarter of this year. Of the 2.4 million cars the company produced in the first 6 months of this year, over 60% rolled out of its factories overseas. With the likes of Samsung and Hyundai building their new factories overseas, it's not hard to figure out why their prosperity won't be felt by ordinary Koreans at home. Hwang Jie, Arirang News. Korea's tourism deficit deepened for the 13th straight month in July. The Bank of Korea and the Korea Culture and Tourism Institute said Wednesday that the nation's tourism deficit amounted to roughly $1.8 billion in the first half of the year. This is mainly because the number of people going overseas outpaced the number of travelers visiting the country. In fact, the Incheon International Airport Corporation projected some 74,000 travelers had left the airport on Wednesday alone, which would constitute a new one-day record in the airport's 12-year history. Approximately 5.5 million people visited Korea in the first half of the year. 7.2 million Koreans headed abroad on vacation in the same period. The U.S. Federal Reserve has vowed to stick with its $85 billion a month bond buying program until the U.S. economy strengthens to the point that it doesn't need support. The Fed said Wednesday that economic activity in the U.S. was only expanding moderately, but it forecasts growth to pick up in the second half of the year. The Fed statement came after the Commerce Department announced that the U.S. economy had grown at an annual rate of 1.7% in the second quarter, a faster pace than economists had expected. This growth is an improvement from sluggish growth in the first quarter, which was downwardly revised to 1.1%. In response to growing unrest in the country following the overthrow of President Mohamed Morsi, Egypt's interim government has ordered the police to immediately end all sit-in protests by Morsi's supporters. In a televised address Wednesday, an Egyptian official called the protests a threat to national security. The interim government says the police can take all necessary measures to end the protests, which have been continuing since the army removed Morsi from office early last month. Members of Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood have vowed to stay on the streets despite the serious threat of violence. They've been camping out in Cairo demanding Morsi's reinstatement. Meanwhile, government officials also announced they will prosecute several Muslim Brotherhood leaders on charges of inciting violence. Korea and Azerbaijan's close cultural ties aren't just focused on the trends of the present, but also in discovering the past. In this, the final report in a series highlighting Korea and Azerbaijan's cultural exchanges, our Song Ji-sun tells us how Korean archaeologists recently recovered some historical artifacts in Gabala.
On the outskirts of modern-day Gabala sits the former capital site of Caucasian Albania, which dates back nearly 2,000 years. Excavation of this historic site was put on a halt in 1990, but it was Korean archaeologists who resumed the undertaking some 19 years later under the initiatives of the Korea-Azerbaijan Cultural Exchange. Professor Kim Jong-il of Seoul National University has spent the past 5 years here at the Serbil site, finishing the excavation of this northern wall, a defensive fortress dating back to the 2nd century.
This Serbil site could be used as a very strong evidence, clear evidence, to prove the existence of the Caucasian Albanian countries and very developed urban way of life of the period.
Every finding here, including the buried human remains, have undergone the preservation process thanks to the Korean team's expertise. Up to 30 Korean researchers are dispatched here at any given time, with graduate students working using the project to work on their dissertations. This catacomb is another remarkable site Korean team is currently working on. The catacomb, an underground graveyard, has been preserved in very fair condition, with passageways and chambers remaining almost intact. A representative at Seoul Baku Cultural Exchange says the Koreans have helped to discover and enrich Azerbaijan's history.
Their experience is very important for us, and in this year was many interesting findings as catacombs, burials, and
It hasn't been easy for the Korean archaeologists. They start their days excavating at 7 a.m. every day and live close by. But even after they return to Korea, their fellow scholars will continue with a trek to Gabala to continue what others before them started. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News, Gabala.
Good morning. Samsung has been on a tear as of late, winning 9 of their last 11 games in the KBO, going into the contest last night against Kia. The Lions were looking to make it 2 in a row against the Tigers. So let's see what happened in Gwangju with the Lions and Tigers and bats. Oh my! Samsung down 4-2 in the 6th when Chente In launches this 3-run homer to center field. That puts Samsung ahead 5-4. 7th of the season for Chen. Now the Lions would rally for 10 runs in the 6th inning. 2 of those were courtesy Choi You-sun. He pops this up with runners on 2nd and 3rd. Now there are 2 outs, so the runners are going, and shortstop Kim Sun-bin drops the ball. If you score 10 runs in an inning, there's always a play like that somewhere in there. Lions beat the Tigers 16-4. Nexon and Hanwha. Park Byung-ho with a single in the 1st to drive in the game's first run. 1-0 Nexon as Chang Gi-young scores. Now, Park Byung-ho wouldn't be finished there. The hero of all heroes smacks his league-leading 22nd home run. That's a 2-run shot for his 71st and 72nd RBIs of the season, also league highs. Nexon end up beating the Eagles 5-2 for the win. Now, the Bears were taking on the Giants, and Fifai Fo Phum says Yang Yi-ji, his 6th home run. That makes it 2-0 for Doosan. And then in the 8th, Yang Yi-ji would step up and do it again. Not a home run this time, but he does double to left, which scores 2 more runs. That's part of a 5-run 8th for Doosan. It allows Doosan to crush the Giants. 9-1 would be your final. NC at SK. NC up 2-0 in the 7th. No Jin Hyuk adds some insurance in a hurry. Just his second home run of the year. It's a solo shot. That makes it 3-0. And that was more than enough offense for Lee Jae-hak, who wasn't holding anything back in terms of his good stuff. Lee Jae-hak on the mound. He gets Chejung swinging at strike 3. How about Park Jong-kwon looking? And then Han Dong-min goes down swinging as well as he strikes out the side in the 7th. Lee Jae-hak would go the distance, getting Park Jong-kwon to foul out to end the game. Lee would strike out 12 in a two-hit shutout while walking just 3 batters. That's his 6th win as it lowers his ERA to 2.96. Over in Japan, Lee Dae-ho is starting to heat up again after collecting a pair of hits yesterday against the SoftBank Hawks. The big beef was 2 for 3 with only RBI for the Oryx Buffaloes as they fell 3-1 to SoftBank. Lee Dae-ho raising his average to 324 with the 2 hits. That was Lee Dae-ho's 31st multi-hit game of the season. To soccer, K-League saw a full slate of games yesterday, including a fast-surging Seoul team looking for their 4th straight win as they hosted Jeju United. Let's go and see what happened at Sangam Stadium. In the 70th minute, there is Adelson putting Seoul ahead. That would actually be the lone goal of the game, as Seoul would hang on to win it 1-0. Seoul had a 1-point lead on Jeju for 6th. That has now been extended to a 4-point lead with the victory. Taking a look at Gangwon at Pohang, it was a field day for the Steelers, who were playing at home. There's Park Sung-ho that puts away his own goal in the 22nd minute, picking up his own rebound. 26th minute, and a very unselfish play to Cho Chan-ho, who would score in the 26th minute. He would come up with another goal in the 53rd minute. Probably didn't need to tap this one in, but yeah, better safe than sorry, I guess. His 2nd of the game. You know what? In the 78th minute, he would add another to complete the hat trick. As, yeah, there he is, Johnny on the spot. The hat trick for Cho Chan-ho puts him in a tie for 4th in goals with 9 on the season. More importantly, it keeps Pohang on pace with 1st place Ulsan. And speaking of Ulsan, they were 3-1 winners over Gyeongnam yesterday. Jeonbuk beat Daegu 1-0. Incheon defeated Daejeon 1-0. Suwon topped Busan 2-0. And Cheonnam edged Seongnam 2-1. 2:30 this afternoon, Korean time, the LPGA's British Open will tee off at St. Andrews in Fife, Scotland. And, you know, ever since Park In-bi won the U.S. Open a month ago, the anticipation for this has been like no other LPGA event before. If Park In-bi wins, she will become the only golfer ever to win the first 4 majors of an LPGA season. And she spent the day yesterday practicing on the very difficult course. And though there was a media horde following her around, she's taken the spotlight in stride.
You know, my emotions doesn't express so much on my face. Yeah, that's just how I've played golf, and it's been working, you know, really good on the golf course. So I think I found myself, you know, I figured that it was gonna be, you know, very good on the golf course. So that's why, you know, I think
Despite putting up the best numbers on the tour last year, Park In-bi hadn't received this much media attention until winning the U.S. Open. Now, being at the center of attention, she has been leaning on sports psychologist Dr. Jo Soo-kyung more than ever.
She makes me a happier person on the golf course and outside the golf course, and she teaches me how to handle the pressure on the golf course and how to enjoy the game of golf.
Early forecasts predict the conditions to be favorable for golfers teeing off earlier than later. And auspiciously, Park In-bi will be teeing off just a half hour after the first group, along with England's Jodi Urechadov and Beatriz Ricari of Spain. And that is your look at sports. Remember to eat healthy and get some exercise today.
Good morning. I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your latest weather forecast. Now get ready, guys. It's going to be a sweltering day across the peninsula. Luckily, no rain is in the forecast in central provinces, but we do expect passing showers in some regions down south in the afternoon, but it should be very spotty and isolated. Now tomorrow, monsoon front that's been lingering south coast will be heading to North Korea again, so most nations will wake up to cloudy skies and scattered showers will be seen in southern provinces from early morning to noon. Then central provinces will be affected by monsoon showers between the afternoon and evening. And we should see a similar temperature as today. Now the monsoon season should finally end early next week, and even hotter summer days will be followed. Well, right now as you can see, it's looking pretty good. So we should wake up to mostly sunny skies, and sunshine will be mixed with scattered clouds throughout the day. And along with the heat and humidity, it will feel much hotter than actual numbers. So let's take a closer look at today's readings. Now daytime highs are slightly higher than yesterday. Seoul and Gwangju will hike up to 32 degrees Celsius, that's 90 degrees Fahrenheit, while Daegu soars to 34 and Busan will make it to 30. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like blazing days ahead for Jeju today. Meanwhile, Dokdo and Mount Gungang will stay a bit cooler in mid-20s. Now that's all from me at this hour. Have a great day, and back to Yoo-sun in the studio.
Thank you, Ji-yeon, and those are the stories we're following at this hour. Thank you for watching.